Okay, I think we are live now. Let's go ahead and get things started. So let me know if anything is not coming in clearly, if I'm talking too loud, not loud enough, etc. So we will be watching, well, you will be watching this commission job I have. We're going to be rendering and coloring in Copic markers. So let me pull up my reference images and then we'll get things started here. Grab your snacks, your sodas, your Copic markers if you're following along. Anything you might need to get settled in, and we'll get things going here. So I think the first thing we'll do is work on these skin tones. So the skin tone areas are going to be, I don't know if you can tell or not, but they're going to be right here, right along there, and the hands. So it's not a whole lot of areas to work with, or work on, but it's all good. Hello there, how are you? Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for checking out the stream. So well, I'm also grabbing a scratch piece of paper. I always keep a scrap paper handy. You can see it's pretty filled up now, but we still got a little bit of room. So some people like to keep those charts, you know, those squares, those swatches, but I just like to keep a piece of paper handy, because you don't, you know, you're gonna blend, you know what I'm saying? So a lot of the times those swatches aren't gonna do much good if, you know, if you're gonna be going over it. So, you know, just my personal preference. So let's get things started, and we're going to be using YR000. That's going to be our base for the skin tone. And she's got a little bit of forehead showing here, so let's fill that in. And then we'll start working our way down on the face areas. Once again, if I'm not talking loud enough, let me know. I'm not a real loud talker. Sometimes I talk too much, but not necessarily loud enough. So. And we're just getting in these, you know, basic flat colors in here, leaving a little bit of room for the highlights. And that's one thing to remember is if you work on a white paper, it's good to leave room for the highlights on your paper, you know, rather than going back and going over with, you know, like a acrylic paint or a colored pencil. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think you get a cleaner look if you just leave the paper flat. So, and as I like to let people know, that when I'm explaining things to you, I'm explaining the way I do things, so it's not necessarily the only way to do it. or quote unquote the correct way to do it. It's just the way that I do it, so you know, take it with a grain of salt, but it's worth a try if you haven't tried this technique yet. Also, you see that I'm using the chisel tip. I like to use the chisel tip rather than the brush tip most of the time when I'm using the Copics. I really don't know why, it's just something I'm a little more comfortable with. Maybe because it fills more area quickly. But you're free to use the brush tip if you know you're more comfortable. By all means, do so. So right here, there's going to be a little bit of a shine, so we'll make sure to leave that area. And right here is probably a bit of a shine too, but there's just really not enough room to leave that white space, so we're gonna go ahead and just fill that in. I mean, you can leave this spot right here, but I'm gonna go ahead and just fill it in. And we'll work our way down. Hope everybody's doing good on this relaxing Wednesday evening, hump day evening. It's real stormy out here in Arizona. It's monsoon season, so there's you know, quite a bit of thunderstorm activity. It was raining pretty hard earlier. It's calmed down now. So as of right now, it's pretty nice and quiet. Not sure if it's gonna hit us again. If it does, you'll definitely hear it because my studio is right next to the window. My studio is a spare bedroom in the house, so I'm right up against the window. Turn this down real quick. Got my phone playing some tunes in the background, really lightly and softly. I just don't want to violate any YouTube copyright laws, so gotta make sure to keep it low. And so for the hands, I'm just gonna go ahead and fill them in. There's really no need to add any kind of highlights, you know, like in this area for the hands. So we'll go ahead and just fill those in all the way. Okay, so now we got the base tone in, or the flat. Got the flat color in there. So now we'll go into our next shade of YR, and I used the YR000 to begin with, and instead of YR00, I'm gonna go YR01. So I'm just gonna jump to the one step over, and it should work out just fine. I mean, you can if you want to jump to the next level, YR00, and build it up in steps like that. That's fine. I'm just skipping that extra step. This one's gonna work out just fine. And if it looks a little bit too dark, it's okay because the paper is going to soak in that color. And so, you know, you don't have to worry about it being too dark because that paper is going to soak in some of that color, some of that ink. So just kind of envision where these form shadows are going to go. And then place them in there. And if the edges look a little too harsh, that's okay, because we're gonna soften these edges up. Okay. Right now the edges are a little bit hard, but like I said, we're gonna go back over it. So don't stress out too much about that. And the fingers, let's see, let's go, yeah, let's jump to the hands here. I'm just barely putting in a little bit of shadow on one side of the fingers, just to give it a little bit of form. And then we'll go around to the hand too, just to indicate, you know, where it kind of turns right there. If you look at your hand, if you make a fist, you'll see where it kind of, you know, turns around this area. So, and the top, we don't really need to do anything. If you want to, you can show where the knuckle joint is, and just to indicate it there. And this hand, the same thing. We'll just put a little bit of shadow here. If you want to put it a little bit more where the joint is, you know, you can do that. And then there, it's going to be a little bit darker because it's closed, the fist. So right now it's looking kind of orangish or reddish, so that's okay because we're gonna add some other tones to it. And then right here in the collarbone, a little bit of shadow there. Hopefully I didn't block that too much. And it's gonna have a cast shadow because her chin is gonna create this. Okay, now we're going to the face. So on this part, I am going to go back to the YR00 because we want the face to be a little bit softer looking. So hopefully the camera can capture that without being too blurry. So now we're going to go ahead and start adding in some of these shadow areas, and we're going to build them up on the face. And the reason I didn't use the 01 color, because I'd rather build it up and get softer tones this way. You know, you don't want to create too much of a contrast on the face, at least not yet. You know, you want to still retain that soft look. For like a man's drawing, you know, you can go ahead and do that, but for a woman's drawing, pinups, you know, you kind of want to keep it a softer look. just put in those shading areas wherever you think it's going to need it. And I've been asked before, you know, what's a good way to learn how to draw figures and faces, and honestly the best way to do it is to take some life drawing classes where you can actually draw, you know, live figures. That'll help you out with your anatomy. It'll help out greatly. You know, rather than, I mean, you, of course, if all you have is photographs or books, then, you know, by all means do that. But if you ever get a chance, I would definitely recommend taking some life drawing, either classes or studio sessions. I'm sure they have open studio sessions in your area somewhere. Just, you know, I would look it up. So yeah, that's what I would recommend doing. Okay, so now we got the YR00. Let's go back to the YR01 just for a little bit of a deeper tone. Now I'm using the brush because you know, we got a little bit of detail work here, so and let's go back to our original YR00, 000, the first one that we used, and we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of blending. So see how these tones are a little bit harsh, so let's go ahead and go back over it, and that'll smoothen up these tones. See how that cheek's getting nice and smooth now? And then right here, it's not going to need a whole lot, and then right there you don't need it because it's a cast shadow. Right here where the forms are turning, that's where you want to soften those edges. So what it does when you're going over it again like this is it kind of reactivates the ink, and so, you know, it kind of lets it blend itself. Kind of think of like if you're reactivating some watercolor, you know, you're grabbing a wet brush and then going over an area that's dried up a little bit. It'll reactivate it. So I mean, there's a certain point where it's gonna start getting blotchy, but you know, you don't have to worry about that too much right now in the beginning stages. So right here we're softening these edges. And then right here in the hand too, where it turns, you want to soften that up so, you know, makes a nice transition. And then right here we can leave this, you know, kind of harsh, since this might be like a, not necessarily a cast shadow, but it's where the joint is, so it might not be as soft as the rest of these form shadows. Okay, so as you can see, it's already starting to take some form, you know, even though we've just used a couple of colors, a couple of shades. But it is, you know, we are going to end up using a couple of darker tones and in a different color hue that will get rid of all that pinkish tone right now. And you see this cast shadow where I didn't really blend it a whole lot. It's because the cast shadow is going to have more of a hard edge. So that's just something to keep in mind. You know, you might know these things already, but just in case somebody's still, you know, dialing in on the fundamentals, that'll help them out. Okay, so now we're going to go over the skin tones again in some of these areas with this E11. E11, so let's go back over here. We're just going to need to get a little bit darker, and it's a little bit more towards the brown side. So I'm just kind of dabbing it in there. I'm not really, not necessarily going over every single area. You know, just where it's going to need it, where it's the darkest, or, you know, where it needs some extra depth. Like for instance on the face, I'm just going to use it on a couple of areas, like this cast shadow on the nose right there. Can you see that? And then maybe right here, it's going to be a little bit darker. If the hair wasn't covering this part of the cheek, I would probably put a dash right here towards the end where it's going to be a little bit darker. But you can't really see it, so I'm going to leave that as is. And right here in the collarbone, just a tad right there. Okay, and then this cast shadows definitely gonna need a little bit of darker tone to it. Excuse the squeaky chair. It's my old office chair that I've had for many years now. Definitely due for an upgrade, but you know, there's other stuff that I'll probably that's a higher priority in the studio than the chair. You know, it's still pretty comfortable, so I think that's the main thing. Okay, and then the hand, just in select areas here. That's good. You're right here on this inside part of the fingers. That's good right there. Don't gotta get too crazy, especially on like a drawing this size. You know, if it was a little bit bigger, then you can start working it in even more. But right now, if you just indicate the detail rather than, you know, going all out, it's probably better because you know, that way you don't end up over detailing it and ending up with a like a blotchy picture. So right here, let's add a little bit of tone just to bring out that collarbone a little bit. And right here to give it some form. Don't gotta do a whole lot, just to indicate that, you know, the forms of the skin. Okay, it's looking pretty good so far. And let's go ahead and do some more work on the face, like her eyes. Let's see what color the eyes are. I'm using a reference here. Eyes are blue. Now there's not a whole lot of room to work with here, so really all you need to do is just kind of dab it in there. So let me grab my blue Copic multiliner. I'm using this blue color. And I'm just going to very gently just dab it in here. It might not even be very noticeable on your screen. And then see how I'm leaving that white part, that little white highlight? That's all gotta have to go back over it with like acrylic paint. I mean, sometimes if you make a mistake and you end up coloring it all in, you can go back over it and put a dash of acrylic paint or a white gel pen or something. But they tend to not turn out as bright when they dry. They, you know, just like the ink, they kind of dry out a little bit darker than when you first put them on. Okay, so the lips are like a deep violet, which is going to work out perfectly because I've got a deep violet multi-liner. And I'm using a 0.3 size. So let's go ahead and put that in. And it looks like the light, her highlights are coming in from this side, so let's leave the highlight on the same side. We're doing the lips, so I'll just fill these in. Leaving a little bit of light at the top, you know, because that light's going to catch that outer rim right there. So and then right here, we'll leave a couple of white areas there. That way it gives it a nice kind of wet look to the lips. You see what I'm saying? If you leave these two areas right there, it'll, you know, give it that nice shininess to it. I mean, if you want to, you can fill in this part, and you can make this a little bit smaller if you want to, but I like leaving it as is. That way it looks nice and shiny and glossy. Alright. You could also do it with you know, your brush tip on the Copic marker, but since I had this and it's, you know, a real fine point, it works out just right. So okay, now let's get these eyebrows taken care of. Looks like it'll be like a dark brown. So let's grab the old multi-liners again and let's go with dark brown. So as always, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Don't be shy. Always good to learn as you go along. You know, I'm still learning too. Always learning. Sometimes you learn just by doing it and making mistakes and figuring out different techniques or methods, and say, oh yeah, I never knew I could do it that way. Like for instance, doing the hair. When I did this yesterday, instead of building it up like we did with the skin tones, I just put the solid flat black, and then I went and grabbed some colored pencils, some light blue colored pencils, and then, you know, started putting in the lights, and then I finished it off with the white colored pencil, like right here in these areas right there. So that's a method that I've kind of just recently started doing with you know, solid black tones. Saves a little time, and also, you know, can give it a softer look too. Okay, so we're making some good progress here. Let's go ahead and work on her this tiara. I think it's a tiara. So I was told I could make it into my own interpretation, so that's kind of what I'm doing. And I'm going to use a little bit lighter yellow than what it calls for. So on the reference images, her headpiece right here is the same color as this kind of manila yellow cape, but I'm going to go with a little bit lighter, more yellowish. So I trust my client will be okay with that. And I'm giving it a little bit of a shine too, just to give it kind of like a metallic look. So I'm leaving a crisp edge right there to leave that light, you know, just like we did with the lips. And then we'll go back over that with our E11 color, the same one. This is the darkest color we used on skin tones. And so what I like to do is put that dark color right next to this lightest area, and that makes it kind of jump out a little bit more. See how it's now kind of standing out a little bit more. And then right here, if you want to add a little bit more. And then you can leave it. You don't have to reblend it if you don't want to. Okay, so we'll fill in this centerpiece. Let's use a W6, which is a warm gray, number 6. Just to fill in that space. Okay. And let's see. Let's put in a little bit of like some neck muscles, because right here the neck's looking a little bit flat. So let's see if we can add some dimension to that. Let's go back to our YR00, YR00. Just to indicate a little bit of a neck muscle there. And then back here, okay. Now we've got this part done. Actually, let's add a little bit of a shadow on the forehead too. Let's go back to YR00. just so it's not a stiff, flat color right there. Now what we can do with our colored pencils is kind of add a little bit of detail here. It'll be very subtle, but you know, it's going to make a difference. And then when you're you know, especially drawing for a client, you want to put in that little extra touch. So the color that I like to mostly use is this one for my detail work. It's not too dark, but it's still deep enough to get some decent detail. So just very lightly go in some areas where it's hard to get to with the markers. So right here, this cast shadow, work around the nose a little bit. And if you're not comfortable using colored pencils over your Copics, then you know, you can always test them on a scrap paper. So right here in the cast shadow, deepen that up just a little bit, then fade it out towards the end. See how it made it a little bit deeper in the tone? Kind of gives it some extra dimension. And the hands don't really need it, so I mean, we'll throw a little bit here. Right here, it's going to probably need some because it's, you know, a real dark area where your fist is closed. If you close your hand right now, you'll see this inside area is pretty dark. So maybe just a tad right here. The trick is to go really lightly. Okay, so I think we're good. Maybe right here under the lip is going to have a little bit of that cast shadow area. Okay, so I think we're good with the skin tones. Well, you know what? Let's add a little bit of, see, this headpiece is resting on her forehead, but we want to give it a little bit of dimension, so we'll add just a touch of a cast shadow here. You know, it's real thin. Just to make it pop out a little bit. And it's very subtle, but it still helped, you know, bring it out a little bit more. Okay. And since we got our colored pencils open, the case open, we can go ahead and deepen some of these tones on the white part of her suit. So let's grab our cool gray colored pencil, and as you can see, I've been using this one quite a bit. It's a Color Soft by Derwent. It's actually a little bit on the dark side, but if you go lightly with it, it'll give you some nice definition. So just working it around where it needs a little bit of extra depth. And I don't know if you can tell on the screen or not, but when I did the white colors, I didn't use just gray. When I first did, I used a C0 for a cool gray, and I did the basic form shadows, and I built them up not with just darker grays, but also using warm and cool colors. Like, I don't know if you can tell if there's some lavenders in there, some blues, and then some pink tones. So just using a little bit of color temperature helps create that white look. That way you don't have to use your grays and give it just a cold gray color. So very gently just going around. I'm using the side of the pencil. It helps make the strokes a little bit softer. Also, when I'm sketching with pencil, I like to sketch with the side of the pencil. And maybe just a tad right here, very gently here. You don't want to overdo it because you'll kind of kill that soft look to it. So if you have to blend it in a little bit, that's fine. In fact, I've got a blender. Let's see how that works here. One of these paper blenders. I don't really use blenders a whole lot. I've been meaning to, just try them out, but usually when I sketch, I tend to leave the strokes as they are. Kind of like that sketchy look to it. But obviously this is a, full piece that I'm working on for a client, so I want to try to take out those rough edges the best I can. Okay, so let's go over to this area here, very gently. Putting in this deeper tone, just to make it, stand out a little bit more. And the inside part of her arm right there, it's gonna have one, maybe a little bit right there. Okay. And then on these cast shadows here, it's up to you if you want to deepen them up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Just a little bit. You don't want to go too dark because, it's going to take away the illusion of the white outfit. So don't want to use too much pressure. You're just enhancing these tones. You don't really want to deepen them too much, if that makes sense. Okay, so I think we're pretty good with those tones right there. I don't know how well these blenders work on colored pencil. They work a little bit. Definitely on graphite pencil they'll work real well. And charcoal, stuff that's more smudgy. Smudgeable, is that a word? Okay. We're good to go on that part. So now we can go ahead and continue on with like the yellow portions of the picture, like the cape. We're going to render this cape, and then we're going to fill in the boots and then do her trim. So we're going to go with a, what color am I going to use? First, let me put my colored pencil away so that it's out of the way. Right now I've got a little bit of collection of markers going on the drawing table, so bear with me. I'm going to put a couple of these away just so they'll be out of sight, out of mind. That's a good thing to remember too, is keep your work area clutter-free as much as possible. And I'm guilty of it too, you know. You get real into your drawing, and then before you know, you got a whole pile of junk all over the place getting in the way. So it's all good though. Okay, so I'm going to use this white 21, and it is running out of ink, so I kind of did this on purpose. I waited till we did the live stream so I can show you how I refill my Copic markers. So I'm going to go ahead and refill it with this refill right here. So let's go ahead and do that now. Show you how I do it. Let me grab a drink of water first. Kind of feel like one of those singers that are having a long concert. They need a drink of tea with honey to soothe the voice. So anyways, here's how I like to refill my markers. So I've uncapped the refill and the marker itself. And one thing I like to do is put the caps both facing up. That way you know for sure you're putting in the correct refill. Luckily I haven't put in the wrong color yet, you know, in the many times that I've refilled my markers. But I like to, you know, have these, and that way right before I put in the drops I can look at a quick glance and make sure they're both the same color. So anyways, I got the chisel tip off, and I'm just going to put a few drops in here. I like to put between 10 and 20 drops, so I'm going to go ahead and put in 20. Okay, so after you do that, go ahead and pop in back your chisel tip, and then I like to put in a couple of drops on the tip itself just to moisten it up a little bit. Okay, now we'll put back our, you can see there's some dripping going on, so that's why I like to put this rag on before I refill my ink. And also I like to use a rag to kind of clean up any spillage on the marker itself. You don't have to do that, but you know, I like to keep my tools as clean as possible. So that should be good. And the reason I took off both caps is to relieve the pressure from the marker. You know, that way it doesn't like build up too much pressure and then start seeping out. I don't know if that's ever happened, but I mean, that's what I like to do. So anyways, that's how I refill my markers. Let's get back to business. start rendering this cape. Okay, so this color is the white 21. That's the color that we just filled up. So let's go one shade deeper, which is the white 23. White 23. And actually this marker is pretty dry. Luckily I have a couple of these white 23 colors. Okay. So let's go ahead and start with the cape, and then we'll go back to our chisel tip since it's kind of a big area. Start filling in some of this form. As you can see, I'm leaving these blank areas where her electricity is flowing through, so we're just filling it in back here wherever it's going to need some kind of form. And I'm definitely going to go with a darker tone after this, but you know, you still want that initial shading color to begin with. Maybe right here it's going to have a little bit of a, like where the cape is flowing or folding through here. And remember, it's going to dry up a little bit lighter than when you first put it on. So okay, let's keep going, and we'll kind of imagine how these folds are gonna go. You know, we don't really have a reference to use, so we'll just go off of you know, our imagination. And then if you've another thing to study is drapery, and that's one thing you can definitely do at home. You know, just put a piece of cloth in front of you, and then get a lamp and put it to the side so you'll get some nice lighting to it, and then just draw the cloth as you see it, and then you can study how the folds and the rolls of the fabric go, and after a while you'll get familiar with, you know, how they're supposed to form. So that's something good to practice with. So I'm just going here along kind of randomly, but also, you know, making sure that it goes in the proper position, proper location. You don't want to just throw, you know, strokes all over the place. With no purpose. So we just want to get these base form shadows in here. All right. So just working our way around. And this cape has two parts to it, so that's why there's these gaps here. You know, it's like kind of like a double cape, so I didn't make a mistake. Just filling these in, these form shadows. I'm definitely gonna go over it again with a deeper tone. It's all good though. You gotta get that base form shadow first in anyway, so. I think we're pretty good there. A little bit here. I'll throw some on the back since it's away from the rest of the lighted areas. Okay. I'll put it back here. Alright, so let's go with a deeper tone and let's try a see, I think E11 would be good. We'll go back to this E11 color that we used on the skin. Yeah, this works pretty good. So I'm just putting it in where the deeper tones are going to go. Not necessarily going over every single part of the one we just did, but just enough to add to the dimension and form of the cape. And we'll probably still go even deeper, so. Now we're building it up in layers. And then right here it's going to be darker. The color right here is E11. Okay. And now let's go with E13. I think this should work out for the deepest tones here. You don't want to go like super deep. But enough so that you get the correct form. A lot of these times these earth tones will have like a shine to them when they finish drying. I mean, there's nothing wrong with your marker, it's just the way that the pigments are. So they just react a little bit differently than your standard blues and greens and oranges. So, you know, if that's something that you notice when you're using your markers, or any kind of medium for that matter, you know, oil paints will do the same thing, watercolors. The earth tones will tend to have different reactions than the rest of your colors. So, just something to keep in mind. Okay. That's pretty good right there. And maybe just for funsies, we'll throw in like a cast shadow here from her foot. And we'll go with the lighter color here since it's fading away. There you go. All right, so let's go back to her trim, which is going to be the same Y21 color. So let's go ahead and fill those in. And we can use a brush tip for this. So I'm watching from a separate, I'm watching on an iPad now, so the stream, and on my end seems to be quite a bit of buffering. So it's happening on your end. Please let me know. Or if you're watching the replay, and you're experiencing the buffering when you're watching the live stream, also let me know. That way I can make some adjustments for the next time. So I just heard some thunder outside. So I was telling you earlier, we've been having some, we're in the middle of our, we started our monsoon season here in Arizona. And so we've had some pretty good storms the past few days. And I just heard some thunder outside. So hopefully didn't knock out any power or anything like that. Hey, thank you for watching. I appreciate that. You know, we'll definitely see you next time. And yeah, definitely check out the replay. Thanks, my friend, for watching. So we'll continue on with the shoulder area here. Normally I'd be using the chisel tip here, but I've already got the brush tip out, so more laziness than anything else. That's why I'm using the brush tip here. Grab another drink of water. Okay, so where we got Y21. Okay, here we go. Got another little trim area to fill in. And just put these little details in here. And it doesn't look like there's any other areas except for the boots. So let's go ahead and fill these boots in with this same Y21 color. We'll start with this one here. So for the boots, you know, we're definitely going to use some deeper tones, probably a little bit deeper than this brown, or at least that same darkness, because we want it to stand out against, you know, her cape. which is the same color. So and then making sure to leave these blank areas where her stream of electricity is kind of wrapping around her leg there. So okay, so now we got it filled in pretty good. Y21, so let's go to our Y23. I don't think there's a Y25. Well, if there is, I don't have it, so. Okay, that's all good. Actually, let's try something. Let's try this YRO2. Let's see how that looks. And this is one of the reasons I keep a scratch paper instead of using the charts. See, if you had a chart, you would have that color, and that's all you'd have. And if you wanted to see how this color looked on top of it, it would be difficult because, see, it would be two separate swatches there. So when you have a separate paper to do your scratch testing on, you can see how it's going to look. And I'm kind of liking that look. Yeah, I kind of like how it looks. I might try the YR01 because it's a little bit lighter. So I think I'm going to try that one first. That way it'll move away a little bit from the earth tones that we've been using here. So let's see how that looks right here. It'll still give you your depth, but just adds a little bit of color to it. Okay, so we'll add in these form shadows here. And there's definitely thunder going on outside. I'm not sure if you guys can hear that or not. So just working our way around her boots here before we add in the deeper tones. So let's go ahead and add those deeper earth tones. And then we're just putting this on the very edges of these form shadows, so we're not going like all the way like how we did here. See how it goes all the way there? We're just putting these on the very edges, just so it kind of touches the edge of that form shadow. And then we're going to blend it in a little bit right now too. So let's go back to our original Y21 color. Okay. And just kind of dab it in there. You don't got to keep going over and over and over. Especially with these earth tones, they'll tend to get a little bit blotchy if you overwork it. So keep that in mind when you're putting these in. We're getting there, making progress. So let me take a look and see. I like how the form is on the boots, but I want to give it a little bit extra so that it'll, you know, definitely separate itself from the cape. Let's see what happens if we glaze it with this green tone here. Yeah, this cool green is definitely helping. So what this green is actually doing is it's helping separate these yellow boots from the yellow cape. You know, it's very subtle, but you might not even be able to tell on your screen right there, but it's definitely helping to separate it. Partly because excuse me, it's on the cool end of the spectrum, and so it's complementing those warm tones. If you know what I'm talking about, it's, you know, giving it that kind of a color vibration. So yeah, definitely help. It's very subtle, like I said, but it definitely helps make them stand out a little bit from the cape. Excuse me, let me grab a drink of water. Voice getting a little raspy there. Okay, so we got that part taken care of. And we have our colored pencil, so we can actually touch these up a little bit too. And then we'll go back to the colored pencil that we were using for the skin tones to touch those up. Which is this one right here. What is the color? Burnt ochre. It's a burnt ochre color, so just going to very gently add in some of these tones here. And you can see I'm using the side of the pencil, so it gives us a softer look to it. And it's helping blend things in a little more evenly. I mean, you could do it with the markers too, but this way you have a little bit more control. So let's go very gently around, using very little pressure. Just enough to get some of that pigment in there. Hopefully that's showing through. Okay. Then we'll add some here on these little design elements to make it, you know, give it some more dimension. And we might even go over it with the white colored pencil just to help make it stand out just a little bit more. You know, the boots are probably going to be a little bit shinier than the cape itself. Can you hear the rain back there? Yeah, it's raining right in front of the window. So it's picking up all that noise on the outside. Last time we could hear the ice cream truck passing by. Today we're picking up the sounds of the rain. So if you need something to put you to sleep, just throw on this video and put you right to sleep. The rain will, not my drawing techniques, hopefully. My voice might put you to sleep. Okay, so just adding in, using a little bit more pressure here on the the outside part of these round shapes. And then I'm going to grab my white pencil and just to give it a little bit extra form to it. So grab my white color pencil here. This is a Prismacolor white color pencil. So it's not going to show up a whole lot because the color underneath it is, you know, it's still a little on the lighter side, so it's not going to show a whole lot, but it is going to give it a little bit of extra dimension to it. So just use it wherever you think it's going to need it. Maybe right here not as much on the bottom because, you know, the light's coming from the top, so might not need it as much on the bottom. Okay, should be good right there. And yeah, I definitely think that helped out what we were trying to originally do, which was make it separate from the cape. So making some good progress on this drawing. Let's go ahead and add some more tone onto the trim area here. So go with the E11. Probably doesn't need a whole lot of blending or rendering here, but you know, make sure you got enough in there to show what's going on here. Notice on this part I'm kind of matching the form of her skin tones in her torso area. Raining nice out there. Thankfully I don't have to water the lawn for the rest of the week. There was a bad fire earlier in a couple of miles down the road. There's a supermarket, and apparently the roof collapsed and created a big huge fire. So we could actually see the big old black cloud of smoke from the backyard, and I mean, hopefully nobody got hurt. So I'm going to have to check out the details later on the news. So sometimes those things happen during monsoon season here in Arizona. These storms come at you quick out of nowhere. So thank you for my friend for the compliment. We're just working our way along here. The character is Thunder Woman. It's an original character from a client, and he asked me to do give it my rendition of the character. So I'm doing my best here to, you know, give it a nice look to it in my style. So I'm going over this with the E11. E11 is one of the earth tones. And the base color that I used over her trimming here was Y21. So if you use Copic markers, those are the colors I'm using. So I'm sitting here in my studio enjoying the sound of the rain. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to give it, you know, a nice little variation and contrast here. With a dark and light. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that way you don't miss a beat. And try to wrap up. I mean, once I finish here tonight, I'm probably gonna say it's finished. But then usually what happens is I'll give it a day, and then I'll go, you know what, I could use a little bit of refinement right here, and then I'll start kind of picking at it. So it always ends up happening that way, but it's cool. You know, I told my client I'd ship it out to him by Friday, so I've got an extra day to work with if I have to. But I appreciate you checking out the stream on both Instagram and here. And just to let you know, I will be starting up a Patreon probably next week. I've got the page pretty much all done. I just need to add a few more rewards to it, and I got to record my intro video, my welcome video. So keep an eye out for that. You know, love to have you as part of my Patreon family. So let's see, I'm looking at it and seeing what else I can add to this. I'm gonna go ahead and glaze over this with the green color that I use here. So I kind of like how that green tone looks. Hopefully it comes out good on your screen. So let's go ahead and add in this green tone, just to give a little bit of color in there. This is one of those subtle details that you can tell something's different, but you don't know exactly what it is. But you know. Are you doing to add more dark glass with electricity? Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yeah, so I'm gonna actually put in some darks here and there, not cover the whole paper, but you know, enough so that some of these areas kind of jump out more at you. And I'll try and add a little bit more darks here, but you know, I can't add too many more darks without it making it look fake. So what I might just end up doing is making the actual electricity itself a little bit darker, which I did yesterday a little bit, but it's gonna need a little bit more here. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna add to it. Grab my trusty colored pencil here. Thanks for the questions, by the way. I always enjoy interacting with my followers and answering any questions I might have. I know when I was first learning all this stuff, I didn't have a whole lot of resources, you know, as far as like watching artists, except maybe the ones on TV. But of course you couldn't ask them questions. So I just kind of learned by trial and error. And then when the internet came along, you know, that opened up a whole new resource for learning. Okay, so we got that part. I think this is pretty good right here. So let's add a little bit of white to it to make it jump out just a little bit. That's just enough to make it more dimensionalized. We'll probably add a little bit here too. You don't want to cover all the yellow tone, but you know, just here and there, give it a little bit of a lightness to it. You can also use a gel pen, but sometimes those gel pens they'll be add too much white. You know what I'm saying? So. Okay, so we got that down, and then let's go grab our gray colored pencil and we'll add just a little bit of cast shadow here. I mean, you could do this with the brush tip on your Copic marker also, but you get a little bit more control with the colored pencils. Yeah, it's still possible. These are actually done with colored pencils, so they're limited as to how bright you can get it. But if I have to, I can break out with the acrylic paints. So yeah, we'll see how it looks once we're wrapped up here. Good observation, though. Can you hear the storm out there? It's raining really hard over here. One of these I'm going to do a studio tour, a studio live tour, and show you exactly where my work area is and stuff. So okay, let's go ahead and touch up these lightning bolts or whatever they're called. Let's try some of this violet colors. Might be a little too violet. Let's see. Let's try this BV00. See what happens. And then I don't want to go over all of this blue, just kind of in select areas. Yeah, it's raining really hard right now. I'm in Arizona and this is our monsoon season, so that's why I was asking if you can hear the rain from where you're at and the thunder. So just kind of dabbing around here, especially in the lighter areas where it's not standing out quite as much. And just working my way around using this, even though it's a lighter purple tone, it comes out a little bit darker here. So okay. So now back here we can actually fill it in with, let's give some nice, let's check out this color. Got my scratch paper here. You want to try a different color? Let's try the BG13. Yeah, this one works better. So let's try this BG13. Nice vibrant teal color. Just kind of give it an indication of a background here. So I like to use a chisel tip whenever I'm doing larger areas. And actually in smaller areas too, I like to use the chisel tip. So that's my default default tip when I'm using a Copic marker. But if you're more comfortable using the brush tip, by all means. I've also used watercolors to put in the backgrounds and stuff. The problem with watercolor though is if you're not using watercolor paper, it'll tend to buckle it, so you got to be careful and not get the paper too wet. Yeah, I agree about the lightning bolts. And but we're not gonna, like I said, we're not gonna cover the whole paper, but you know, just enough to give a little background here, and it'll help fill out some of this dead white space too. So, but yeah, good observation on your end. And then we'll keep the same direction going. As you know, it's kind of going like this. So we'll keep that going along on this side too. So I don't know if you were watching earlier, but I was showing how to refill my Copic markers. So when you watch the replay, and unless you already know how to fill it, then of course you don't need to see it, but I had to refill my Y21 color. And a recommendation I like to make when people are buying Copic markers is when you go out and buy brand new Copics, try to pick up the refill while you're at it, especially for the lighter colors. Yeah, yep. Definitely helps out the white part too. Yeah, I'm going to put in some more here, and that's going to help make it even stand out more. So but like I was saying, yeah, try to pick up the refills whenever you can. Some loud thunder out there. Hopefully the power doesn't shut off on us. We'll tough it out. If I have to break out the candlelight to finish it, then that's what I'm gonna do. Drawing by candlelight. I'm not sure if I've ever done that. That would be interesting. That would be an interesting live stream. How to draw by candlelight. We'll go around here very gently so we don't go over these lines. I probably should use the brush tip instead of the chisel, but I mean, I'm kind of used to this chisel tip now, so. I really like this paper too. It's called Canson illustration paper. Although my favorite paper to use is, it's a Bristol board, and it's made by a company called I forgot the name of the company, but it's a nice bright white Eon papers. That's what's called, Eon Common Guard board. Actually, no, that's not the reason I use the blue. The blue is more like color temperature. I used the shading to start off with. I used a cool gray color, and I used the, I think it was a C0, and then from there I went to like the deeper tones, like a C1, and then I started glazing it with like a light blue and then a light lavender color. And I don't know if you can see there, but I also added like a pink tone like towards the top parts of the shadows, so that way it's not just a cold gray color doing the shading, I mean, you can definitely use just the grays to shade it, but I like to add a little bit of color just to make it, stand out a little bit more. But I think I did do that on the Instagram live stream, so I'll definitely make another video showing techniques on how to draw white and draw the form. So we'll continue on to here. This area will have a little bit less green because I don't want to like fill it all up, but want to add some in here. So yeah, I'm gonna definitely do a tutorial. Thanks, my friend. Appreciate that. Yeah, the boots, when I first colored them in, they, I use the same colors as the cape because that's what how his, character is designed. But I wanted to stand out a little bit more, so I did a little bit more rendering and glazed it over with that yellow-green color, just to make it stand out a little bit more, Thunder Woman is the name of the character, and you can see more different artists how they did their versions of the character on DeviantArt. This is actually a commission I got from Phoenix Comic Fest during Memorial Day weekend. That's the comic convention that I exhibit at every year. And the client asked me to create a version of his character that he created, so I'm finishing it up right now for him. I think that should be good with the green. We don't really need to go too much further down. On this blue color, I'm going to deepen those tones with some more blue. So let's see, what color did I use for that? I used B01. So let's see how that looks here. Now it's deepening the tones here, but it's going to lighten up too when it dries, so we'll give it another look after it's soaked into the paper. Once again, we don't have to go all around the whole part that we already did, because your eye will fill in those blank areas. But just enough to, you know, keep the general direction of the electricity going. So maybe a little better here too. Just for S and G's. So I think I'm going to give it one little pass here with a cool gray color. I guess C1 or C2. Do I prefer Copic markers? Yeah, right now I do, because it's just, they're faster. And actually I started off using oil paints and pastels, so I was a portrait artist for, you know, maybe about 8 years or so before I moved into illustration work. And I still have my oil paints, and I actually love using oil paints. Like if I had a choice between using any medium, I would probably stick to oil paints, but it's just they're so much trouble to use, because you got to set up your easel, you got to do all the cleanup after you're done painting. So that's one reason I don't use oils anymore. You know, I haven't used them in years. I mean, I love how the finished piece comes out. You know, they're nice and vibrant, and but just the reward to effort ratio is just not there. So, and not to mention, you know, when you're done with the canvas, you got to store it somewhere, and before you know it, you're running out of room. So Yeah, that's one of the reasons I don't use oils anymore. Um, and I don't know if you follow my works anywhere else, but I also do digital work. You know, I use a Cintiq tablet. So my two mediums right now that I do my pinup drawings are pretty much Copic markers and digital. And then, you know, I use graphite pencil for sketching and stuff. But like for commission work, it's either Copic markers or digital. So right now I'm using this C2 color. It's a C2 cool gray. Just to, you know, make the tone stand out a little bit. When you're doing white, you don't want to go too dark with the shading, because then it'll look off. That's one thing to remember when you're trying to render snow. You know, use the shading to create the whiteness, but don't overdo it. So I think that works out right there. Let's give this a once over. And I think I am going to wrap this up, at least for the night. Like I normally say, I'm gonna look at it again tomorrow and then decide, here's a little area I need to fix, or I'm gonna tweak it right here. So that's what I normally do. So, but for now, I think I'm gonna call it a day. So I thank you for watching. Please join me the next time, and definitely check out my Patreon when I launch it next week. So thanks for watching. We'll see you the next time.